Coming up on today's Locked On Irish, I'm going to give you 5 players that I'm going to be monitoring the closest throughout training camp because I believe their performance this season is going to be what separates Notre Dame from being just a really good team to one capable of making a serious run in the college football playoff. That's next.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome into Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. And today is Friday, July 26th. So happy Friday, everybody. And thank you for getting your weekend started right here by making this your first listen of the day. I'm Tyler Wojciak, and I'm the host. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports. And as always, you can watch the show on YouTube or you can listen wherever it is that you get your podcasts. If you are watching along on YouTube, please like the video below, subscribe to the channel, or if you're listening to the podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe there as well. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Okay, as of today, we are just 5 days away from the start of training camp for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, and I can't even explain to you how excited I am to be this close to the start of the season. It almost feels like the first day of school in a way, or maybe the first day of summer is a better way to put it, because I don't think I was that excited for the first day of school, but I was very excited for the first day of summer. The long off season is almost at its end. We could talk about real live football, and I can't wait. And today I'm going to go over the 5 players that I'm going to be watching most closely throughout training camp, because I think they're going to be the difference between Notre Dame being just really, really good and a team that's really capable of making a run in the college football playoff. It's not necessarily the 5 best players on the roster, although there is going to be some overlap here. But these are the guys who I find most intriguing and the guys who I am most excited to see. So let's get to it. Here's the list, 1 through 5. And number 1, this is not going to be a shocker. It is the quarterback, Riley Leonard. On one hand, it is pretty obvious to just say the quarterback. Like, I could just say, hey, Riley Leonard is the quarterback from Notre Dame. He is going to be the most intriguing player on this team because he plays the most important position, and obviously you need a good quarterback if you want to go far at any level of football in the modern day and age. But if I did that, that wouldn't really be a great listen, now would it? So I'm going to go much deeper into this because there really are so many layers to the Riley Leonard situation. I've talked about it a lot on this podcast throughout the offseason. Pretty much every single other Notre Dame outlet has done the exact same thing because he's just a really interesting player and pretty polarizing in the Notre Dame fan base. And I think part of that has to do with his health status. I think part of that has to do with Notre Dame's history of quarterbacks, Notre Dame's history of transfer quarterbacks specifically. This is now their 3rd transfer quarterback in the past 4 years, their 3rd one-year rental, as some people like to call it. And also his skill set is pretty polarizing. Just his game, both as a runner and as a passer. It's caused a lot of debate among Notre Dame fans and people in the college football space because you've got some people like Nate Tice who believes that Riley Leonard is going to be drafted in like the 1st or a 2nd round of the upcoming NFL draft. And there's some people who think that he's just highly overrated and not that good of a prospect. Part of that has to do with the fact that he didn't really have a great season last year when the expectations for him were really, really high. Now, it started out great when he had that huge game against Clemson, when they were a top 15 team in the country, huge win for Duke and that whole program, and Riley Leonard literally carried them to victory. So the hype train for him was rolling, and then after he got hurt at the very end of that Notre Dame game, his season really just went off the rails. He tried to come back from that injury a little bit too soon. It didn't work out for him. So the stock on Riley Leonard has dropped a little bit, but still a lot of teams wanted him in the transfer portal, and for good reason. And like any team in college football, if you want to make a serious run in the playoff, you need an elite quarterback. And that's why a lot of teams are going after Riley Leonard. They believe that he can be elite. I believe that he has elite traits. It's just a matter of, can he be consistent on a game-to-game basis? Because he's definitely one of the best dual-threat quarterbacks in the entire country. He's also 6'4", 212 pounds, so he's going to be very difficult for any defensive player to bring down. He has great acceleration. He's fast in the open field, and he's kind of like got some Ben Roethlisberger in him where you can have a big defensive lineman or a big linebacker in the backfield and have him wrapped up, and you think you've got him down, and then he just like squirts out of that and gets a few extra yards. Trust me, as a Browns fan growing up watching pardon the siren going off in the background. But if, as a Browns fan growing up watching the Browns just constantly get demolished by the Steelers, and watching Ben Roethlisberger just terrorize the franchise for years and years, that is so frustrating for an opposing fan when you think you've got the quarterback sacked, and then not only does he get out of it, but then he makes a play down the field for a first down or potentially even a touchdown. And Riley Leonard has those capabilities. His passing is what really leaves a lot to be desired, specifically his accuracy, because he has a really strong arm. Like, he can throw it far down the field, but can he do it accurately and find guys on the move and put the ball in the right space? Last year against Notre Dame, he was not doing that very well in the first half, but then got much better in the second half. And I will say, Notre Dame did have the best pass defense in the entire country last year. So our perception of Riley Leonard, specifically in that game, is probably going to be a little bit skewed because Notre Dame made pretty much every single opposing quarterback look bad last season. So we shouldn't be shocked that Riley Leonard struggled a little bit in that game. And for some people, not you, of course, because you're smart, you've watched the tape of Riley Leonard. Some people just watch that game and were like, oh, he's terrible. And don't get me wrong, I've had my concerns about Riley Leonard as well, but that really started in the lead up to that game last year when I was watching him throughout that season, watching him as a passer. And I will admit there are some legitimate concerns about his accuracy, and it's going to be the thing that I'm most interested to see what he does in fall camp, so long as he's healthy, right? Because obviously, given the ankle surgeries that happened this offseason, there's obviously a lot of questions about that. He says he's fully healthy, ready to go. Marcus Freeman says the same thing. So, if that's true and he looks fine running around, everyone is just going to be focusing on how accurate is he throwing to Notre Dame's wide receivers and the tight ends. I think he's going to be good enough in that department. I'm not making any promises. I'm not saying he's going to throw like 70% completion percentage or anything like that this year, but I think that he's going to be good enough as a passer that you're not going to have to worry about him and Notre Dame's passing game. Like, look, they've got guys open, they just can't hit him. Don't think that's going to be the case with Riley Leonard. Another thing that I think I've really come around to as we've gotten closer and closer this season, and I mentioned this yesterday on the podcast with Luke Smith as we were talking about our burning questions entering training camp, I don't think Notre Dame has had a quarterback that they are going to use in the run game like Riley Leonard since DeShone Kizer, back when Mike Denbrock was the offensive coordinator. So if you look at what Kizer did in 2015, he had 657 sack-adjusted rushing yards on 111 carries. That averages out to 5.9 yards per carry for 10 touchdowns in 11.5 games. That was really good. He did get sacked 23 times that season for negative 137 yards, so his total rushing yards that year is only 520. He also had 4 fumbles. I don't know if this is just like selective memory, but I don't remember DeShone Kizer getting sacked 23 times. That's a lot. I don't remember his 4 fumbles either, but still, like, regardless of that, I think those are the kind of numbers that you could expect to see Riley Leonard put up on the ground this year. And now I think the counter to that would be, well, Notre Dame has 2 really good running backs. Why would they be running Riley Leonard that often? Well, they also had 2 really good running backs in 2015. C.J. Prosise ran for over 1,000 yards, and Josh Adams wasn't that far behind him with over 800 rushing yards as well. So Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love are going to be the 2 main ball carriers for this offense, but as defenses start to key on those guys, they're going to relax on Riley Leonard, and he's going to make them pay. So I think that is where he's going to be most effective in this offense, and Mike Denbrock is going to be putting him in situations to have success. I also don't think he's going to have to throw the ball all over the field that often. Notre Dame wants to run the ball. They certainly have the guys in the backfield to do it. So I am bullish on Riley Leonard. I have certainly come around to him more since when they first added him in the transfer portal. Anyone who's been listening to this podcast every single day knew, or they know that when that move happened, I was like, okay, this is a good thing, but I didn't have super high expectations. But as we've gotten closer to the season, after Notre Dame added Mike Denbrock, just hearing Riley Leonard and watching more of his film throughout the years, I feel much better about what he could do this season for the Irish. And I will say, I think a lot of fans' concerns about him is they're less to do with Riley Leonard and has more to do with Jack Cohn and Sam Hartman, specifically Sam Hartman, and all the hype that Hartman had coming into Notre Dame, and the fact that his time at Notre Dame was disappointing relative to our high expectations that we had for him before the season. I get that, and I think that some of that sentiment is carrying over to this season with how fans perceive Riley Leonard, and they're like, oh, he's being billed as this savior. I don't think he is. I don't think he's being billed as the savior at all. I just think that he could be a really good college quarterback, and he is going to help Notre Dame win games. It's going to be a little bit different than the Hartman hype train this year, But you know what? I bought my ticket. I am really, really excited to see what Riley Leonard is going to do this season for the Irish, and it starts at training camp in just a few days. Really excited for it. Okay, coming up next, Benjamin Morrison might be the most proven player on this entire roster, but is he going to be ready for Texas A&M? We'll start to see in fall camp. Plus, why one Notre Dame wide receiver is absolutely crucial to generating a legitimate passing game. That's next. This episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. I recently ran into some car troubles myself, had to get my headlight fixed, and when I asked around the local shops, I wasn't really liking the prices that they were throwing at me. They were a little bit more expensive than what I was hoping for. Then I went to eBay Motors. They hooked it up. They came through for me, and they're going to come through for you as well. Keep your ride or die alive at ebay.com/motors. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Okay, coming into number 2 for my most intriguing players entering training camp is cornerback Benjamin Morrison. And this is a bit of a surprise because he's the best player on the team. We all know that. And usually with the very best players on the team, especially the most proven players, guys like Howard Cross, who's not on this list, or like a Riley Mills, normally you wouldn't have a player of that stature on this because you already know what you're going to get. He's going to be a great player. But obviously with Benjamin Morrison, there are the health concerns. He underwent shoulder surgery in March, and that has kept him out throughout spring practice and throughout the summer as well. At the time that it happened, and Luke and I discussed this yesterday on the show, it was very surprising, one, and a bit of a news dump because there was no press conference. It was basically just like Notre Dame PR tweeted, Benjamin Morrison underwent successful surgery. He will miss the remainder of spring practice. And the moment that happened, everyone was going through the timeline. They're like, okay, if he has the surgery in March, it's a pretty significant surgery on the shoulder, so that's going to keep him out throughout these next couple months at least, most likely through the summer as well. He's going to be pushing right up until August, right? If we're looking like at a 5-month recovery time, that's right when fall camp starts. Is he going to be ready to go for the opener? There were a lot of questions about that. Mark Freeman was able to answer some of them in May when he provided some updates on Benjamin Morrison's injury, as well as Mitchell Evans, Riley Leonard, and some others as well. But he made it seem like Morrison is going to be ready to go for the Texas A&M game, but he's not going to be a full participant at the start of camp. And that is why he's going to be so interesting to watch, because even if he's not ready to go at the start of camp, with every single passing day, everyone is going to be more and more concerned about Benjamin Morrison's health status, because if he ends up just coming in a week later, he looks ready to go, he's out there running around, not afraid to hit people or anything like that, that is going to ease a lot of concerns. Because if Benjamin Morrison is not able to really participate at all in training camp, but yet they still throw him out there in the season opener, like, I'm going to be concerned, because he's probably going to be rusty. Pretty much any human would be if they went basically 5 to 6 months without playing full go tackle football, and then they get thrown out there on the biggest stage in week 1 going up against a quality opponent in Texas A&M. Like, it is fair to be concerned about Benjamin Morrison, even though he has already proven that when he's healthy, he is one of the best cornerbacks in the entire country. So it's not a matter of how is he going to perform this season. It's all going to be about gearing up for that game against Texas A&M, because as we've discussed at length on this podcast, that is going to be an extremely important game for Notre Dame this season in their college football playoff hopes, and it's going to be a really tough matchup going up against Texas A&M. Even though the talk really hasn't been about their offense, still, you really need a guy like Benjamin Morrison out there, especially when you're going to be breaking in a new starting cornerback at the field in either Christian Gray or Jane Mickey. Benjamin Morrison's presence out there is so helpful to this defense because he basically eliminates the boundary side of the field. And then that allows Al Golden and Notre Dame defense to structure their defense to give, whether it be Mickey or Gray, some additional help out there And they aren't going to be able to do that if Morrison is out and they're playing Mickey and Gray out there at the same time. I don't know about you. I would personally be very worried if Notre Dame had to go out there with two brand new starters at cornerback and a new starter at safety, even though Rod Hurd has plenty of experience. Like, I love what Xavier Watts is as a player. I think that's a lot to ask for him in that game. So Benjamin Morrison's health is a concern. It's something I'm going to be monitoring very closely from the start of training camp. Okay, number 3. Chris Mitchell, wide receiver, transfer from Florida International. Right away, I think Chris Mitchell can be the best deep threat that Notre Dame has had on its roster since Chase Claypool. He's obviously not the all-around wide receiver that Chase Claypool was at Notre Dame, but I think that's still very significant. It's also not a very high bar to clear, if we're being honest. Like, think about Notre Dame's best deep threats since Chase Claypool. You look at 2020, like, was Javon McKinley a deep threat? No. Was Ben Skoranek? No. 2021 and in 2022, maybe Braden Lenzy. Like, there was certainly a time where it felt like Braden Lenzy was going to be an absolute burner that could take the top off the defense, but it just never really came to fruition, at least not on a consistent basis. You could make the case that in 2022 he was open an awful lot, but Drew Pine just could not get him the ball. That's fair. Tyler Buckner missed him on that deep ball at the end of the first half against the Marshall game. And that's one of those what-if moments where if you think back to that, like, what if Tyler Buckner hits Braden Lenzy in stride on that play? Notre Dame goes into the half with the lead. They don't lose to Marshall. Maybe Tyler Buckner doesn't get hurt. College football is a much different place if that happens. But he didn't, and we are here today with Notre Dame not having a reliable deep threat ever since Chase Claypool. You need a reliable deep threat to put pressure on opposing defenses because it forces them to spread out, and that leaves a lot more space on the field. Just think about Steph Curry in basketball. He crosses half court, and the defense has to account for him. So they have to bring out a defender to guard him, which means it's 4-on-4 with a lot more space in the basketball court. Trust me, I know. I already referenced my Browns fandom. I can tell you as a big Cavs fans, especially when they were going at it with the Warriors 4 straight years in the NBA Finals, there was nothing worse than watching Steph Curry play basketball and you are rooting against him because he was just that good and he would just make your defense look silly at times. And I feel like when you have a great deep threat, you put the defense in really unfortunate circumstances, just like Steph Curry did all the time against the Cavaliers. If you look at what Chris Mitchell did last year for Florida International, so again, take all this with a grain of salt, but I still think it's very important. He caught 64 passes for just over 1,100 yards, which averages out to 93.2 yards per game, and he had 7 touchdowns. Very, very impressive stuff. But here's how good he was catching the deep ball. Mitchell caught 14 passes that traveled 20 yards or more for 578 yards and 4 touchdowns. He wasn't just a deep threat either. He did make 12 contested catches last season out of 23 attempts. All of this is according to Pro Football Focus, but those are really, really impressive numbers. It's not like he was just catching a screen pass, he had some blockers, and then he'd make some plays in space and then get a bunch of yards that way. No, he was lined up. He would beat his corner, catch the ball for a huge gain going down the field, and that was huge for him in the Florida International offense last year. He also performed really well against Arkansas, the one Power 5 team that they played last year. Now, granted, Arkansas, not a very good Power 5 team last year, but still he had 157 receiving yards in that game, including an 80-yard touchdown reception. So I don't expect him to put those kind of numbers up for Notre Dame this year. But if he can do half of that, or even 2/3 of what he did last year for Florida International, he can do that with Notre Dame this year, that will be so huge for the Notre Dame offense because they have other receiving threats. I think Jaden Greathouse is going to lead the team in receptions. I think Jayden Thomas is an extremely underrated player that is going to be a very important piece to this Notre Dame offense. But I don't look at either of those guys as deep threats, guys that are going to take the top off defense, especially going up against the better secondaries that Notre Dame is going to play this season. Chris Mitchell has that kind of speed. He has that kind of ability to do it. We saw it a little bit in the spring game. He made poor Isaiah Dunn the walk-on fall and scored the game-winning touchdown. And I hope that was just a glimpse into what Chris Mitchell is going to be able to do this season. And even though we didn't really get to see a ton of it in spring practice, just because I think the viewing that the media had was just pretty limited, Chris Mitchell is going to be a guy who I would just love to see go one-on-one with Benjamin Morrison if he's healthy, right? Like, that is sort of the matchup that you want to see. And if Chris Mitchell can get him deep, then he can take anyone deep. And now all of a sudden, Riley Leonard has a deep pass or a deep receiver to throw to. He can throw it underneath to Greathouse, Faison, Thomas. He can throw it over the middle to Mitchell Evans. Like, it just opens up the passing game in a whole new way that Notre Dame just really hasn't had. And that's not to say that there aren't other receivers on Notre Dame who can go deep, because Jordan Faison if you get him on like a slot wheel route or something like that, certainly there are other guys who can get open down the field to make a play. But I feel like Chris Mitchell, if you just have him one-on-one, hey, man, run a fade. I need to get the ball to you down the field. We need a big play at this time. He is going to be the most reliable option. It's why Notre Dame pursued him so aggressively in the transfer portal, and it's why I'm so excited to see him in training camp. Okay, I've got two more players that I want to talk about, including a linebacker who looks like he's finally ready to reach his 5-star potential, and a dark horse candidate to win the Heisman. Might seem like a lot. That's coming up next. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sporting like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Okay, my pick for today's show. Right now, you go on FanDuel Sportsbook. Aaron Judge is plus 240 to hit over 60 regular season home runs. Right now, he's got 35, so he's only 25 away. And yes, I understand the Yankees have been slumping real bad lately, but not Aaron Judge. He's still been hitting the crap out of the ball, and I think he's going to do it. So I would take it, plus 240, Aaron Judge to hit over 60 regular season home runs. Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Okay, the fourth player that I'm really excited to see in training camp is linebacker Jaylen Sneed. And you can make the argument that Sneed is the most interesting player on this entire roster. He came in with a ton of hype, 5-star prospect out of high school, but then he redshirted his freshman year, which most 5-stars don't do. And if they do, they transfer up. Sneed didn't do that. Then he came, and then his redshirt freshman year, he only played 231 snaps and more of a reserve role, but now he looks like a legitimate starting candidate opposite Jack Kaiser. And I think that given his ability, his speed, his athleticism, his ability to go sideline to sideline, Notre Dame hasn't had a linebacker with that kind of raw athletic ability since Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. And if you remember, it took JOK a few years too before he really became the linebacker that we know and love, the one that would go on to win the Butkus Award. I'm not saying that's going to be the path for Sneed, but now that he's entering his third season, this is an absolutely crucial year for him, and he is riding a ton of momentum. After spring practice, linebacker coach Max Bullis said that Sneed made the biggest jump over the offseason compared to any other linebackers. The coaching staff was raving about him, specifically his maturity, his consistency on a day-to-day basis. And those are all great things to hear because we know he's got the athleticism and the ability, but can he do the fundamentals? His attention to detail. Is it all on point? Is it all what you need to, is it all where it needs to be if you want to be a successful linebacker, especially one on a defense as good as Notre Dame's? So the one thing that's kind of funny about Sneed, and I'm guilty of this as well, is he's looked at as like a young player because he doesn't have a ton of playing experience, which is true. He's also only finished 2 years of college. He's actually the second most veteran linebacker behind only Jack Kaiser. He's the only true junior linebacker left because Josh Burnham and Junior Tuihalamaka moved to the defensive line. And then Nolan left, and there are no senior linebackers. So he is going to be the veteran of this group behind Jack Kaiser. And even though he's still going to lean on Kaiser a lot, specifically if he needs, some help getting to where he needs to be pre-snap or anything like that, the time is now for him. And I really think that he's going to take advantage of that. I think he recognizes the competition that's in that room. And that's going to be something very interesting to follow because it's not just Sneed, right? There's Drake Bowen. There's Kingston Viliamu-Asa. There's Jaden Osprey. All four guys, I should say, are all going to be fighting for time to play linebacker. And if Jack Kaiser is basically penciled in to play every single snap, that means there's probably going to only be one other linebacker on the field most of the time. All of those guys I just mentioned at linebacker bring a bunch of different things to the table. They're all very good, very capable players. But if Jaylen Sneed just really turns it on, he takes his game to a whole nother level, it's going to be really hard for those other guys to find the field. And that's a good thing for Notre Dame because Sneed is that type of player. There is a reason he was a 5-star out of high school. He just has a different skill set than most guys. Some of it is God-given. A lot of it has to do with hard work as well. And I'm really excited to see him put it all together because we saw flashes in the past. I mean, just think about that 4th and goal last year against Ohio State. He makes a great play on the ball to bat it down. I thought that would be like a launching point for him in the rest of the season. It wasn't, but still, there have been moments, and I think that in this camp, we're hopefully going to see him really put it all together and become an every down linebacker for Notre Dame and just bring a new piece to the table. Again, it's going to be really hard for him because he's got a lot of really quality competition in that room with KVA, Bowen, and Osprey, but I think he's going to continue riding that wave of momentum, and he is going to be a guy that's extremely hard to take off the field. Okay, my last one, number 5, running back, Jeremiah Love, and I'm not going to lie to you. Part of the reason why I put Jeremiah Love on this list is because he is so good in the EA Sports college football video game. Like, it's insane. I'm in game 9 of my dynasty right now. Jeremiah Love is the Heisman favorite. And not even necessarily because of what he does just as a running back. He's a great player in the slot. I throw passes to him all the time. He's a kick returner. He's the punt returner. Has several returns for touchdowns this year. And I'm playing on hard difficulty too. So, like, I feel like maybe the game made him a little bit better than what he is. Or maybe that's really just how good he is. He's so fast. He has great acceleration. We've already seen that on the real field. Now I think we're going to see that a whole lot more this season. I swear, like, he's a cheat code in the game as a runner, receiver, and as a return guy. But that's just a video game. Now let's compare it to real life. And it just got me thinking about what he could be in Mike Denbrock's offense. Because one thing that we've discussed a lot on this podcast is how Denbrock's offense is all about creating mismatches. Well, there might not be a better mismatch weapon than Jeremiah Love because of his ability as a runner and as a receiver. Like, he can play in the slot and run routes like a wide receiver can, which is not something that most running backs can do. Like, yeah, there are certainly a lot of running backs who can catch the ball out of the backfield on a screen and make a play. But if Love is out there running routes and generating separation from a linebacker or a safety, then you can have him on this field at the same time as Jadarian Price and just creates so many more opportunities for the offense. And I have been on record saying that I think Jadarian Price is a better true running back, particularly running between the tackles, but Love put on some good weight this offseason. I think he's more built to do that. So I think that ability is still very much there for him. He was Notre Dame's second leading rusher last season behind Wojciak Esme with 385 rushing yards and 71 carries. The fact that he was able to earn those carries and essentially take them away from Esme as a true freshman is really, really impressive. He also added another 77 yards on 8 receptions. Plus, he broke off that huge play against Duke on a fake punt that really changed the game for Notre Dame. They were going to stall out on the first drive. Love takes the ball, runs out there for a huge gain for Notre Dame, sets up the score. And I just think that he's going to get a lot more opportunities to make plays in space this season with Mike Denbrock being the guy to get him there. And I just think that he has a special kind of burst, and every single time he touches the ball, there's a chance that he takes it to the house. He didn't have the best game ever in the Sun Bowl, particularly as a runner. I think he only had like 35 rushing yards. But on his one touchdown play, caught the ball, looked like there was a bunch of dudes around him, made 2 sweet juke moves and found his way into the end zone on a play that looked dead in the water when he first caught the ball. Like, he has that kind of ability. And you look at Notre Dame's offense right now, they've got a lot of good players. But do they have one that the defense is legitimately terrified of? I think Love is the best option, right? Because if you think about like the other receivers like Jane Greathouse, Chris Mitchell, he's a great deep threat, but when he catches the ball, is the defense like, oh man, this is really bad. I don't think he's that good or anything like that yet. And to be honest with you, I don't think Notre Dame has had a guy like that really just put the fear of God into the defense since Will Fuller. Because every time Will Fuller was out there, he could beat you deep or he could beat you on that little tunnel screen and take it to the house. Like, he really, really scared defenses, and he was such a good player for Notre Dame. I mean, like Kyron Williams, he was a great running back, certainly capable of breaking off a big play, but I just thought Will Fuller and what he did to opposing defenses was special. Golden Tate is certainly another example as well. The older generation is going to say Rocket Ishmael. Like, those are the kinds of players that I'm talking about here. I don't know if Jeremiah Love is ready to be that just yet, but I think he could be. And again, part of this has to do with the video game, and it got me fantasizing like, man, could he be that kind of player this season? I think he could be. I think we could start to see it in camp too. And I just miss that feeling, quite frankly. And I'm hopeful that Jeremiah Love could be that kind of player for the Irish this season, because it is so fun when you've got a guy on your favorite team, he catches the ball, and you're like, oh my God, you're like getting out of your seat, even if he's catching it like 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage, because he is that much fun to watch. It's why we love watching football. It's why we love the game. It's why the best teams always have a player like that, and that player usually carries them a long way in college football. It's been a while since we had that, and I really think that Jeremiah Love could be that guy for the Irish that we've been missing for a long time, and hopefully we start to see it next week. All right, that is going to do it for me today, and that is another week of Locked On Irish in the books. I'm going to be back with you on Monday We have a special guest on the show. I'm really excited about it. It's his first time on the show. You probably know who he is if you follow other Notre Dame media outlets. It's somebody that I've wanted to interview for a really long time. You're going to want to tune in for that. In the meantime, make sure that you're subscribed on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast. Have a great weekend, everybody. See you Monday.